Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Writers Chat. This is the place where craft connects community, and we are so glad you're here. We're here every Tuesday morning around 11 o'clock Eastern Time, and you can figure out your time zone in the US or go around the globe. We're here mostly every Tuesday, except holidays. I would like to turn it over to Brandy, who's going to introduce our special guest today.
Hello, we have with us esteemed Larry J. Leech
Mm.
II. He will be talking about ghostwriting made easy. And let me tell you a little bit about him. Everyone has a story to tell, but usually with a hot beverage nearby, Larry J. Leech II, a veteran of 40 plus years in publishing, spends his days working with words. As a writing coach of award winning authors and freelance editor, as well as an acquisitions editor and master book coach at Illumify Media. I really can talk. I write better than I talk sometimes. Larry, welcome to Writers Chat again. We're glad to have you back with us.
Brandy and Melissa and Norma, thank you for having me back. I always enjoy my time here, so thank you. I appreciate you having me back. So, ghostwriting today. Let me call up my PowerPoint. I chuckle and you'll see why as soon as I call my PowerPoint up here. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. All right, let me do this. I should have done this beforehand. Here we go. Ghostwriting. I have this opening slide because years ago, when I was at my favorite coffee shop, the one with the mermaid and the green circle and all of that, I mentioned to someone that I was a ghostwriter, and they're like, "Oh, you write stories about ghosts?" I'm like, no, that's not what I meant. So, no, I won't talk about Casper the Friendly Ghost, or I won't even talk about the Ghostbusters. Um, Although these guys are pretty popular. What I want to talk about in terms of ghostwriting is what qualifications you need, what you need to do to break into industry, the process, the connections, everything in regard to ghostwriting. I have found ghostwriting to be rewarding in my career. It was not something that I intended to do. It was never on my radar. It was never in my prayer time. It was never even a thought. It came about 20 some years ago at this point. I was in the middle of editing a project and I received a call from a friend and said, "Hey, are you interested in ghostwriting?" I'm like, "Okay, I guess so. What's involved?" Well, their friend from NASA needed a book written. And I'm like, "Okay." So I hung up the phone and I did the one thing that I think every potential ghostwriter should do. I called a veteran ghostwriter. I called Cease Murphy. Had never met Cease. He had never met me at this point. Cease graciously took my call and spent 30 minutes explaining what a ghostwriter does, his process, a lot of other tips and tricks. So I hung up the phone. I called my friend back and said, "Yeah, I'll do it." Gave him my fee based on a suggestion from Cease. And I bring up Cease because those of us who have been in the industry long enough know how much Cease has poured out to help the writing community. Okay. And I say those of us who have been in the industry long enough, Cease has stepped away. He still does minimum coaching, but Cease has not been at a writers conference in probably 7, 8, 9 years at this point. So a lot of people don't know who Cease is, particularly if they are just now getting into the industry or just, new to the industry in the last 5 or 6 years. Cease is the ghostwriter who wrote 90 Minutes in Heaven that eventually was made into a movie. And I used to remember how many weeks 90 Minutes in Heaven was on the New York Times bestseller list. It was in the hundreds. So multiple years, consecutive weeks in the New York Times bestseller list. Cease has written close to 200 books, and his career, again, has been very influential, helping writers launch their careers, improve their careers, making connections for them. So I owe a great deal of debt and gratitude to Cease, because without Cease's help, I would not be where I am right now. Particularly with my ghostwriting career, I have written 34 I've ghosted 34 books. I have one or two more that I'm in negotiations. Two, I'm in negotiations. So I find ghostwriting rewarding for a lot of reasons. One, it helped me to learn to write books. Instead of trying to break in writing my own fiction or my own nonfiction and learning that process, I learned how to write books by ghostwriting. And in doing so, it built credentials for me to the point that publishers and agents would come to me and say, will you ghost this book for this particular client, for this particular author? So it helped build credentials, writing for someone else, not me, and not have to worry. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I didn't have to do the marketing. I didn't have to do all that other stuff that we, when we publish our own stuff, have to do. The Facebook marketing, social media marketing, all that other stuff. I didn't have to do it. So it helped me build credentials. It helped me learn to write. For some, it will help um, learn to make deadlines. I had been a journalist for 23 years at that point, so on daily newspapers. So deadlines were ingrained in my blood. But for those who are new to book writing and deadlines, ghosting will be a great way to learn how to make deadlines. And the reason that I bring that up this early in the conversation, being a former magazine editor, we it's not good when you miss deadline. You end up earning nicknames, and they're usually not the most flattering. So different numbers over the years have been bantered about the percentage of authors, writers who don't make deadlines. Some people put it at 10% make it, 90% don't. Sometimes that number has been mentioned is a little bit lower. So learn to make deadlines. Ghostwriting is a good way to learn how to make deadlines. The other enjoyment that I have gotten from being a ghostwriter is the friendships. Almost every person I have ghosted for, I have remained friends after and connected with them when I'm in their town or they're in my town, get together for lunch, dinner, whatever, stayed at each other's homes. So a lot of benefits to being a ghostwriter. Is it easy? Yeah, it is in a lot of ways. So let me start through this process here of how it can be easy. Before I even start that, I want to talk about the most important rule because I want the listeners to remember this rule while I talk about the processes, procedures, all of that. The project that you ghostwrite is not about you. You are a servant in this role, much like a barista at Starbucks. A barista is a servant. They serve you a drink that if you had the right equipment at home, you could make yourself. But they are doing something for you as a servant. A ghostwriter is the same thing. You are serving the person that you write for a number of reasons. One, they either don't have the time or the discipline to write. Some people believe that a person needs a ghostwriter because they don't have ability to write. As a coach, I don't believe that. I believe if anyone is coachable or teachable, they can be taught to write. So a person who needs a ghostwriter doesn't have the time or the discipline. So you are providing a service to them. The project is not about you. Cease taught me years ago that when you ghostwrite, There should not even be a single word of your voice in the manuscript. Every word needs to be that of the author that you write for. And I will talk about how to accomplish all of that. So keep this in mind as we move through my rambling and babbling for the next 40 minutes or so. Melissa, do you want people to ask questions as I talk, or do we want to hold those to the end? I'm good either way.
I think we're good either way too. If you'd like us to pop up with questions as they come, we sure can. Otherwise, we can hold them until good pauses. Whatever.
Let's have them ask as we go along. If someone raises their hand or puts something in the chat, that way we can address it right then. It's fine to do it that way. Okay.
Sounds good. Sure thing.
All right. Thank you. So let's move on to the next slide. Why a ghostwriter? I've already mentioned. First, the author typically doesn't have the time. Why a ghostwriter? Have to have the right personality, experience. And I will talk in depth about all of these, but these are 5 points that I want to address today. Connections, money. This is always this is always the big topic. It doesn't matter how long the conversation goes. I will share this now. I would originally plan to wait to the end. I spent an hour interviewing an author, talking with an author about a ghostwriting project. And I'll be honest with numbers and everything on this particular topic here, this story. We spent an hour, got a good grasp of what the author needed. At the very end, she asked me how much. And the whole time I heard a number in my head while we spoke. And I have a flat rate if I do contract work. So when she asked that question, I looked at her and said, $5,000. And she went, oh, if you would have said $5,000 and $5,001, I would have had to walk away. I'm like, okay, that's what we'll do it for. And the irony in all of this, this was at a time in the industry in which authors were waiting 18 months, sometimes 2 years to get a contract. Just a contract, not even to get published. We knew God's hand was in this when in 6 weeks we had a contract. And I'm like, okay, I guess I heard right. So time, personality, experience, connections, and money. Time. Most people would write 22,000 words in 44 days or 35,000 words in 70 days, 55,000 words in 110 days. Okay. Now, when I break this down for pastors, I taught this workshop at a pastor's conference earlier this year. Most of them admitted they could not write that much in that time frame. So that made them good candidates to hire a ghostwriter. Now, can a professional or someone who is not working a full-time job, or even if they are working a full-time job, most writers can crank out a little bit more than that. So it'd be a little bit faster pace. This is first draft too. This is not a completed publishable manuscript. This is getting the project out so that you can go back and do your rewrites. So keep this in mind if you decide to become a ghostwriter. This is a good timeline to use when you present how long it will take. Can a veteran ghostwriter who's written 10 books crank out a 55,000 word book in 2 months? Yeah, they could. It could be a grind because I never recommend to write 7 days a week, even for a veteran ghostwriter. And most of us don't unless we are on a time crunch of a deadline. So keep this timeline in mind for how long it would take. Personality. I think this is a good aspect of being a ghostwriter, because how well do you work with others? Again, this goes back to you're a servant here. Your job is to help a nonfiction author organize and write their message. Could be a pastor, could be someone who needs a business book done with a Christian worldview, could be anything. Okay, it could be a self-help book. It could be a self-help book, mothers who grieve the loss of a child. Okay, but you have to be able to work well with others. If you don't, ghostwriting probably not for you, because a ghostwriter needs a lot of interaction with the author. Now that varies from author to author. Some authors want some kind of communication every day. Some have been fine just hearing from me when I get a third of the book done and then get to the halfway point. So it depends, but you have to be able to work well with others. Again, remember the number one rule. Experience. Now, this is tricky because we all start somewhere. Whenever I sit at a conference and take appointments, first time authors will sit across from me and they're all nervous and they stumble through their words and everything. But I remind them, everyone on faculty at that conference who's published has sat in that seat. So every ghostwriter at some point has never ghosted a book, but we have to start somewhere. So my recommendation is, are you willing to tuck under a mentor? I mentioned early on that Cease was a big help for me. Cease often would read some of my early chapters on a project and give me tips. These are some of the things that Cease did to help me immensely. So if you want to be a ghostwriter, and I'll be honest, I would recommend it. I have enjoyed my experience. I've enjoyed my clients. I've already talked about that. And again, it is a great way to break into publishing and learn a number of things about publishing and writing a book. So if this is something you want to do, find a ghostwriter. There are a number of ghostwriters in the industry. Obviously, I've been asked to do this because I'm a ghostwriter, but if you don't mind, I will drop some other names. Is that okay? Okay. Craig Von Busak has been a ghostwriter. Linda Gilden has been a ghostwriter. Robin Gunder's been a ghostwriter. Twyla Belk. These are just a couple names off the top of my head. So if you don't know them, I can help get you connected with them. I love helping writers. So, but talk under a mentor on this particular topic. Experience. Can you capture the author's voice? This is very important. I mentioned this already, that not a single word of our voice as a writer should appear in the manuscript. Capture the author's voice. Best way to do that is spend time with a particular author. For me, it came natural because by the time I started ghosting, I had already interviewed 13,000 people in my career being a journalist. And the reason that's a round figure is because I had 3,000 articles published by the time I got into book writing. And back in those days, we had to have multiple, excuse me, sources for a story. And in many of my stories, I wrote a lot of features, things like that. So I interviewed 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7, 8 people for a story. So interview, spend time with the author. I'll give you an example from my own career. I ghosted a book for a gentleman who was an undercover FBI agent in an outlaw motorcycle gang. Okay. He had no written material for me. I had to get all my information in interviews. So I visited him at his home. In a 48-hour period, we did 24 hours of interviews. Now, most of that, he did most of the work. I asked questions and he would talk. But I learned his voice. And during part of my time with him, he needed to go to his church to stuff envelopes for some kind of mailing. This is years ago. I had a digital voice recorder that was, small. So I went with him. And while I helped stuff envelopes, I just threw the recorder on the table and we just talked about life, family, hobbies, that kind of stuff. All of this was to understand the way he talked it so I could start hearing his voice in my head when I wrote. And the reason I say that, those of us who write fiction understand and hear that voice of our fictional characters when we write. Okay. Ghosting is the same way. When you write for someone else, you need to hear their voice in your head while you write. You almost have to be a method actor where you take on someone else's persona. All right. Think like them, act like them, which is why when I ghost, one of the first things I tell a client is, I have to get inside your head and run around to find out who you are and why you are who you are. Because most of my ghosting has been memoirs. So I'm telling life stories from this person's point of view. But that's important, is to capture that voice and take on their persona when you write. The experience should know how to meet deadlines. If you don't, this is a great way to learn, as I've mentioned. Melissa, do we have any questions? This would be a good place to, if we have any.
Not yet. People are taking notes. So, but yeah, I'm
Okay.
very, very eager to hear about the deadline aspect too. I definitely like the comment about being like a method actor, because I've often wondered how that works. From a fiction writer's perspective, we do dive deep into our characters if we want to kind of make it a deep experience for readers. But sometimes there's that mental disconnect for some when it comes to connecting with a live human and getting into
Yeah.
their mind. And so I really liked hearing what you had to say about that.
Well, thanks. And it reminds me of a story, and I'm chuckling because I was at a writers conference about 10 years ago, and I talking about ghosting and all of that, and flipping from ghosting to writing my own fiction. And someone raised their hand and said, "Do you have multiple personalities?" I'm like, no, I'm good. Excuse me.
Oh,
All
we
right,
did.
let's see what's. Go
We
ahead.
just had a question pop up. Well, Christine
Mhm.
asked, what questions do you typically ask and how do you get inside? What is the process of I know there's a lot to that, but maybe just like kind of an overview of what kind of questions you might ask somebody in an interview and certain methods that
Mhm.
maybe are very effective to getting into that process.
That is a very good question because it varies from project to project. When I write a memoir, I explain that writing a memoir is a combination of fiction and journalism. The journalism aspect is the who, what, when, where, why, where, all that stuff, the facts. That's the easy part. The fiction part, the fiction technique we use is what brings the story to life with setting, description, emotions, character development, dialogue, all of that. So there are some standard questions that I ask there, mostly to get inside their head. And the question that I feel I ask the most is, when that happened, how did you feel? So that adds a layer of depth that is missing in a lot of memoirs that I see. In the other stories, it depends on the message. If pastors are tricky to work with. Let me throw this in as an aside. A speaking voice is different than a writing voice. You cannot just take a pastor's sermon and write it because there are speaker techniques that show up that need to be eliminated when you transcribe a sermon into a manuscript. And one of those techniques is repeating something 3 times so it sinks in, asking questions to bring the listener's attention back to what you're about to say. Those are typically techniques that we don't use in book writing. But the questions that I would ask in that type of book is, why is this message important to you? What is it that you want the reader to take away? I've learned a technique. I can't remember who developed this for nonfiction books that are not memoirs. It's called SPIT. It stands for story, point, illustration, and takeaway. Every chapter should touch those 4 points in a nonfiction book. SPIT, story, point, illustration. A lot of times the illustration could be a Bible illustration, could be biblical, and the takeaway. So to get that information, particularly if they don't have written documents to give you, sometimes they do. I had one ghostwriting client give me 200 pages, 250 pages of a Word doc I had to sort through. But if it's all interviews, ask questions so that you can hit those markers for each chapter. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I want to talk through my process. Hopefully that answered the question. Melissa, do we have any more?
Yes, we do, if you have time to answer them now.
Sure.
Yeah. Catherine posted a few questions here. Her first one is there a standard starting fee to charge for ghostwriting?
I will talk about that when I get to the money part.
Okay. Then her next question was, where do you find ghostwriting gigs?
Tucking under a mentor helps. Okay. Because when early on in my career as a ghostwriter, Cease would connect me with clients to see if it was a good fit. And I do that the same now for others. I mentioned this before, I've been hired by agents and publishers, but that was because they knew me, they knew I would make deadlines, they knew I could write well, but that was after I had done a number of books. Craziest connection I ever made for a ghostwriting project was at Starbucks. I'm a regular in it. Wherever we live, I become a regular at a local Starbucks. Well, this particular place in Central Florida, I was a regular for 8.5 years. I don't know, 5 or 6 years in, I walked in. I always have a table that I prefer for personal reasons. Walked in, someone's at my table. It's no big deal. It's a public place. The guy looked up at me and said, "Oh, I'm in your seat." I'm like, "No, you're good. I'll just sit over here. Whenever you're done, I'll just slide over there." He goes, "No, I'm in here. Whenever I'm in here, you're at this table. You can have your table." And I'm like, "You really don't have to do that." He got up, went outside. It's 95 degrees outside. We struck up a conversation or a friendship. Well, about a year later, he asked me to ghost a book for him because he was at my table, my favorite table at Starbucks. So it's to answer the question, it's mostly connections. Tucking under a mentor. After a while, publishers and agents will come to you because if they trust you. So, all right, any others?
Her last one was it's kind of a technical question. I don't know if that's something you want to address later, but she said, do you use a standard contract or just invoice for ghostwriting gigs?
I can go ahead and answer that one here. I have a contract. I have actually 3 different contracts. One is a straight contract fee, and I have had this vetted by 2 lawyers that I signed this contract. I sign a contract with every client, even if I'm hired by a publisher or an agent. The first one is the straight contract fee. And I'd be glad to share my contracts with anyone if they want them. They just have to email me. The straight contract fee is typically for someone who wants to self-publish. And the reason I do that is early in my career, I'm ghosting a book for someone who wanted to self-publish. We got through 80% of the book. He decided to finish the book and I got paid $500. So now there's a clause in that contract that if the author ends prior to completion, there's an escalation clause that I get paid for the work that's done. The second contract I have, I will do this for either a traditional, hybrid, self-pub. Only self-pub if I think this project has legs. And what I mean by legs, if it could sell a decent amount of copies. And I will take a smaller contract fee, but a percentage of royalties up until a capped amount. That way the author doesn't have to keep track of sales for the life of the book. The last contract that I will only do with a publisher is a percentage of royalties. Because if a publisher comes to me and says, can you ghost this book for this particular client? I know that they know that book will make some sales. So I'll do a percentage of royalties, but only with a publisher. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I have 3 different contracts based on my experience and what has worked in terms of getting paid and what hasn't worked. So again, if anyone wants a copy of my contracts, I'll be glad to share them.
So then you do not rely on the publisher to send you a contract for contracting you.
I've never had them. I've never had to sign a contract with a publisher. I just
All right,
sign
good
it
to know.
yeah. Now that may be different. Others may have had a different experience, but I've never had to do that.
I know a lot of the times when we run into ghostwriting or work for hire, the one that's hiring will issue the contract. So this is kind of the first I've heard of the ghostwriter having their own contract. So interesting.
Mhm. If I had signed a contract with a publisher to Ghost a Book, you all would have seen it on Facebook. All right. Any other questions, Melissa?
Um, we did have one more. Do you want to take it now or do you want to wait and answer it a little later? It looks like one that can work either time.
Okay. Well, we're at a good spot right now to.
Okay. Christine had another one. She said, do you ever meet a person that has a fantastic story and offer to tell their story for free? I feel so many people who would never be able to afford to pay have amazing stories to tell.
No. I had someone tell me that I should believe enough in their story that I shouldn't charge him. I'm like, yeah, no, because it's a major investment in time. Now, have I reduced my flat rate, contract rate to work with someone within their budget? Numerous times, yes. But to do it for free, to me, that's a big ask. It really is.
Mhm.
Because a ghostwriting project could take anywhere from 3, 6 to 9 months. That's a long time to not get paid.
Yeah,
So, okay.
I think that's it.
Now, if, using my story as an example from earlier, if you're in a meeting with someone and Holy Spirit is telling you, do it for free for them, well, you know who you need to listen to. It's not me. So I always encourage the author, excuse me, after we do our consultation, I always encourage the author, and I tell them I will do the same, to pray about whether we should work together, and if we have not agreed upon a price, what they are hearing that we should do. Again, it goes back to, I have a flat rate, but if the Holy Spirit says do it for a different amount, if I'm not obedient, I have trouble. So, all right. Anyone else? Any others?
I think so.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide then. Connections. Connections are important for a ghostwriter. One of the things that has brought great joy to my clients is my ability, and this is from experience, new ghostwriter will need help in this area, but it has brought great joy to my clients if we don't have a contract with a publisher to connect them with agents or publisher who may want to pick up their project. Because a lot of times, as we know, we get an idea to write a project, to write a manuscript, and we don't have a contract. And if someone is new in the industry or doesn't have any connections in the industry, they don't know where to turn. So to help them make introductions via email or in person at a writers conference or any other event, that is something that you can offer your clients that brings them great relief, great joy. And again, if this is new to you and you don't have those connections, tucking under a mentor will help you get those connections. Okay. Money, money, money. Like I said, that's the big one. I've already shared a story about, how I determine what I'm supposed to charge for a project. And listening to Holy Spirit to me is the most important thing. I'll just be honest. Now, let me walk you through my process. This is something that I've developed over the years, and this will probably answer a couple of the questions that I didn't address earlier. Before I take on a ghostwriting client, we have a consultation. Sometimes it's at a writer's conference, sometimes it's on a Zoom call now, sometimes it's in person. And I walk them through my entire process. And it varies from project to project based on the time frame of the project and the wow, I looked at my light switch and my mind went blank. The availability of the author. We had the consultation, and then based on our conversation, I create an outline for the project, chapter by chapter, and I send it to them for their approval. That becomes my blueprint to work through. If that is acceptable, we'll sign the contract. Okay. After we sign the contract, I send them what I call my action plan. Basically, it is a schedule of when I will send material, when they will send their review back. For example, if they want chapter by chapter on the action plan, I'll write, Larry will send chapter 1 to author by August 1st. August 7th, client will send Larry review of chapter 1 with notes and comments and schedule a Zoom call. So we will talk about that first chapter. We don't do a Zoom call after every chapter. The first couple chapters, I want a Zoom call because I want to hear the author. I want to continue to pick their brain. And, August 14th, Larry will send chapter 2. All right. So we just work our way through the project that way, chapter by chapter. Some of them want a third at a time, a quarter at a time, half at a time, whatever works for them. In the action plan, I also address vacation time or if I'm away at a conference, because those of us who have attended a conference, we know there's typically not enough time to write or even edit anything like that. So I build all of that time in. After all the chapters are done, I have all the reviews done. I'll do all the rewrites, send the client the full manuscript, and then we have another Zoom call to discuss everything. Excuse me, I'll do one more round of rewrite. So this is my third pass through. That's typically enough because we've had a lot of interaction throughout the project. And at that point, we start shopping to an agent or send it to an agent or an editor if we're contracted to do that. So that is very quickly my process. The one part that I'm sorry that I skipped was after the consultation and signing of the contract, I will do interviews. I love to interview people. My go-to, and it's probably based on my journalism background, I like to pull information out of people by asking questions. You know, even if it's a simple editing question I encountered earlier today about a term that first responders use. I could have Googled it, but I come from a first responder family. My two younger brothers were paid firemen. My dad was a fire chief for many years. So I texted him. I said, "Hey, do you guys actually use this term when you're fighting fire?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course." I'm like, "Okay." And my brother called me and he said, "You could have Googled that." I'm like, "I ask." That's my go-to. I ask. So again, the interview process helps me get the voice in my head. And that's, the research time. Um, I take that into account as well. So the money, the contract. One of my contracts, actually two of them, indicate that I require a fifth of the money down upfront because that covers travel and research time. So that's part of the money, but that's my process. The consultation, the outline, signing of the contract, the action plan. And once that gets approved, the writing process starts because, well, some of this other stuff's going on, the back and forth with the action plan, the outline, all of that. I'll start doing my research. Now, I don't do interviews until after the contract sign for time reasons, but doing internet research on a topic while working on the outline, I mean, that doesn't take very much time. I've learned a lot doing, that kind of research on projects I ended up not doing, and then the writing part. Well, I would encourage you, be realistic about your writing, particularly if this is new to you. Capturing someone's voice and making deadlines, if this is your first or second try at writing a manuscript, I would suggest allow 2 weeks to do a chapter early on instead of one. I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot going on in there, and you want to you want to make sure you make your deadlines, and you want to make your client happy. If you say you need 2 weeks to write that first chapter and you can get it done in the first week, that makes you look good. But if you say, "I'll do it in 1 week," and it takes you 2 weeks, well, that starts to cause frustration and lack of trust because the author has to trust you. They are giving you information that in many times is information they've never told anyone else, particularly when you write a memoir. So they have to trust you that you will keep your word and you will do the best to your ability with their story, their message. And if you break that trust early, you may never get it back. I know that hopefully that doesn't sound harsh, but I mean there's a give and take here. When I've worked with memoirs, people have poured their hearts out about stuff they have locked away for many, many years. And they have to know they can trust you. So, all right, cost. Talked about cost for a little bit. My first ghostwriting project I did for $1,500. That was 20 years ago. Again, it's my first book that I wrote. Excuse me. I don't even remember the name of it. I don't have a copy of it here anywhere, so, but I did it for $1,500. When I gained experience, Cease encouraged me to raise my rates. So I do have a flat rate now based on my experience of writing 34 books and 20 years doing this. So, and it also depends on the topic and the author. People get a kick out of this one. The ghostwriter for one of Hillary Clinton's books made $250,000 on a contract fee. I'm like, I'd like to have that gig. Don't know that I would have liked the topic, but and I talked with another ghostwriter at a conference. That was last month. The fee that they charged was mind-boggling, but they have the experience. I mean, someone like Cease or Jerry Jenkins has ghosted, I think, in his career, and some of the others. It just depends on your experience, most of it. So, and then process, I just talked about the process. So that's pretty much it. Ghostwriting made easy. I mean, it's the hardest part that I think for most people is getting down the voice. So this actually just came to me. I've never done this, but if you're new at it, offer to ghost a first chapter for your client to see if you can capture their voice, to see if they're happy with how you captured their voice. Because the first chapter of every project I ever send to a client, first question I ask them, does this sound like you? Only once has someone come back and said, I would not have used that word. But so the hardest I think is capturing the voice. Second, if someone's new at writing books, being consistent in making the deadlines to finish the project in a timely manner. Because my experience, this is not a knock, this is just something I've noticed. Most new writers that I've encountered over the years, they have a job, they have a family, so their writing time is very limited. So they say, I'll write for 8 hours on Saturday. Yeah, no, that doesn't happen. Because someone who's new doesn't have the discipline to sit in a chair for 8 hours to create content. It is difficult. It's a learned skill, in my opinion. That discipline of turning off the internet, shutting down the email programs, turning your phone face down so you're not interrupted with text messages that light up your screen. When I first started to Ghost, my writing time was in the afternoon. And I told everyone, including my family, do not contact me between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's my writing time. And my dad used to complain because it was irritating to him, but it's like, Dad, I have to write. I have a deadline. You know, I don't adhere to that strictly anymore, but I I've written, but if you're new at this, write in smaller chunks. The word counts that I gave earlier, the 22,000, the 35,000, the 55,000, were all based on something that I've taught for close to a decade at this point. 500 words a day. I know we have another community with a different number, but 500 words a day, 5 days a week. Because I never encourage a new writer to write 7 days a week. It is too much of a grind. If you write 500 words a day, that's 2 Word doc pages a day. Okay. Now, what I've seen happen over the years, if you're consistent with it 5 days a week, about the third week, you will cut your time about a quarter. So if it initially took you an hour, and I'm just picking random numbers, if it took you an hour the first 3 weeks to write 2 pages, after the third week, it should be about 45 minutes. And if you continue that pace, about the 6-week mark, you'll cut your original time in half to 30 minutes. And the reason this happens, those of us who have followed a small word count like that for a while, the story is always on the edge of your mind. You'll sit down and write 500 words. And if you write 600, that's fine. If you write 400, it's not the end of the world. Don't beat yourself up over it. But what happens is if you write consistently throughout the rest of the day, you're like, okay, that's what I wrote. What will I write tomorrow? So the next day you sit down and you write what you had in your mind. The hamster wheel starts spinning quicker because the story is always on the edge of your mind. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Again, these times were first draft times. You'll have to go back and do rewrites. I am a big proponent, have been since I started book writing. Write your first draft. Just edit it. Don't edit. Don't edit. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. Don't edit. Just get the story out. Because one of the things I learned years ago while I was a journalist transitioning into book writing, Eva Marie Everson, and I'll drop that name here because I want to illustrate this story. Those of us who know Eva, she's an international speaker, great mentor, et cetera, et cetera. Eva taught a workshop at a Barnes and Noble in Orlando, Florida. Okay. A very unusual place to teach, but it was early in her career. So I attended, and Eva said, don't consider yourself a writer, but a rewriter. That's where the work comes in. Writing the story is easy peasy. Getting the story out, be sloppy with it. First drafts are never publishable anyway. Just get it out, then rewrite it. And that stuck with me because in my journalism career, we got one shot. I mean, you write for a daily newspaper, you write it to the best of your ability on that particular night, and we all have good days and bad days. It gets published, you're on to the next couple stories the next day. So learning to rewrite was a major challenge for me because it was not normal for me. And Eva saying that, and Stephen James, who came to our writers group in Orlando a couple years later, he had just written The Pawn, which was his first book in the Patrick Bauer series. He stood in front of our group of about 80 people and said he'll rewrite a scene 100 times. And I'm like, oh. And I complain if I have to do it 2 or 3 times. So don't consider yourself a writer, but a rewriter. Just get the story out, message out, and then go back and get it to a publishable level. So I told you at the top that I would babble and ramble for a while, so I think I've done enough. So
Larry, I
Melissa,
have a question.
yes.
I saw it in the chats mention about royalties. Is that an automatic? Is that a given that you'll receive royalties, or do you have to have a contract or have that in your contract to receive royalties?
I have that in my contract.
So it's not an automatic.
And I will only do that if the client has a publisher. I'll sign it with the author. When they get paid, then I get paid.
Okay.
Now, if it's straight royalties, we negotiate. And same if I do a split, if I do a small contract fee and a percentage of royalties, the contract fee is based on the percentage of royalties. So if I would get, say, 25% of royalties, I would lower my contract fee. But if I'm only going to get 10% of royalties, then I would raise the contract fee of that particular contract.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you want, we can stop the screen share and let people come on if they have any questions they'd like to ask you in person real quick.
Yeah,
I think
there we go.
I know Rachel's got one. There we go. Go for it, Rachel.
Rachel.
Oh, I have a list in the chat, and I have a few more too.
Okay. Rachel, before you start asking, I am putting my email address in the chat. So anyone who wants to follow up with more questions, wants a copy of the PowerPoint, wants a copy of my contracts, please email me at this email address. In the subject line, put ghostwriting follow-up. Okay. Rachel, you're up.
Oh, okay.
Do I need, let me get a drink of my chai before I answer. Go ahead.
Okay. Hold up. I have two sets. Sorry. Okay. How many Zoom calls total for a 25,000 and a 50,000 word ghostwritten manuscript? Approximately.
It depends. I know you want a concrete answer, but it depends. If you have Word docs to start your research, then you probably will need less Zoom calls to get information. But if you have nothing to work with and you have to write the entire manuscript based on interviews, you could have 5, 6, 10. I mean, there's no set number, Rachel. I'm sorry.
Okay.
This, if you're not sure and this is your first ghostwriting, this would be a great time to have a mentor. You may even want your mentor to come on, if it's okay with the author, to watch you interact with the author. And then you and your mentor after could have a conversation about places where you could develop.
Okay.
That,
All right. Do you have some general questions before you delve into the interview so you can guide the conversation somewhat in the order of their story? So they don't tell you about when they were 4 and jump to when they were 16 and they were in a car accident and back to when they were 3 and to when they were 89 years old. And
Rachel, that's a good question because this is where interviewing skills come into play to learn how to guide an interview, how to bring someone back. I have a workshop that I teach on interviewing. And if someone wants my notes from that, I'd be glad to share those. Just shoot me an email. Because some people will ramble on and on like I have today about a topic. Sometimes you have to reel them back in sometimes, and these are the worst. They'll give you a 1 or 2 word answer. I had a client one time, we were in the midst of working on the outline, and she wanted a chapter about a major event that happened in India to her. And I said, well, what happened? Well, it was life-changing. What do you mean life-changing? I don't know. I can't describe it. And I said, can we try? Give me one thing that happened. Well, I don't know how to put it into words. And I literally said to her, if we can't write this chapter because you can't give me information, we can't do your book. And she's like, well, I don't know what to say. And we ended up not writing the book. I recommend in all my storytelling workshops that deal with fiction, I encourage authors, novelists to interview their characters. Because as much as we teach plot, structure, all of that stuff, what drives a story is character. Think about Titanic. And I know I'm getting off ghostwriting, but there's a point to all this. Think about Titanic. What do we know about the movie before we went to movie? Based on the title, the boat sinks. Okay. So why was Titanic the #1 movie in US history from the time it released to the time Cameron's next movie, Avatar, came out? It's because the story of Jack and Rose. The reason it was put on the Titanic was to create that urgency because basically it is a love story. Could have been set in Revolutionary War era, could have civil rights movement, a rock concert in the 70s. Titanic, there's a major urgency, okay? But it's character driven. Hunger Games, same thing. Why did we care about Hunger Games? Because Katniss volunteered to sacrifice her life for her sister. We can root for a character like that. Okay. So I encourage novelists to interview their characters, even the antagonist. Get inside their head, run around who they are and why they are who they are. And I encourage the novelist, take on the persona of your favorite interviewer. Oprah, whether you like her or not, is a great interviewer. She makes people feel comfortable and open up and spill their guts. Ted Koppel, for those of us who remember Nightline on ABC years ago, great interviewer. Okay. For someone who wants to be a little silly, think of Caesar Flickerman from the Hunger Games series. Okay. Portrayed by Stanley Tucci. I see a couple people smiling. You know who I'm talking about. Practice interviewing, practice on a spouse, practice with your friend. You know, tell someone, you know what, I want to know about your favorite vacation, and ask them questions about their favorite vacation. Practice pulling information out of people. It's too easy to go to now with AI to just go to the internet and get information. I mean, it's information, but the part of that I like about interviewing is you get the feelings. When we know what a character feels, we have a deeper connection. I feel like I'm teaching a whole nother workshop here, which is fine. I love it. When we understand what a character feels, we have a deeper connection. So, Rachel,
Yes.
practice interviewing.
Well, I have, and working on a class on that actually too. And just submitted another article on that last night. But and you know, always much learning to do. Um, I find silence is your friend in an interview sometimes too.
Sometimes,
When there's a pause and then suddenly they start talking. It's amazing.
if they're a talker, if they're not a
Right,
talker, you got to pull it out. The
right,
other thing about interviews is listen,
right.
because follow-up questions are often more powerful than the original question. I interviewed a Christian band years ago, and when we finished, the lead singer of the band said, that he always answers questions in a way to force a follow-up question. And he said he does that to see if the interviewer is a good interviewer or not. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty interesting technique. But they were a popular band and he had been interviewed thousands of times. So he was able to develop that technique. And so, yeah. Any more? Rachel, you said you
Yep.
had a list.
Yeah,
Okay,
hey, listen,
wait.
I do. Yep, I
I'm
do.
going to bust on Rachel here because we've been friends for many years. I have a 1 o'clock, so let's make sure we get all your questions in.
This one's a quick one. While working on a ghostwriting job, are you usually working on other major editing jobs?
Yep, always. Yeah.
Okay.
The
All right.
beauty of what I get to do is I can edit, I can coach in the morning, and then I can write in the afternoon. So, yes.
Okay. All right. I know you're an editor, but do you have someone editor give feedback on your ghostwritten manuscripts if they're going to be self-published after you've completed them?
Self-pub, hybrid, traditional. I always have someone read behind me,
Okay. All right.
and I pay them for it too.
Okay. Um, what what do you have any special favorite equipment you use to record your interviews? Any preferred software for your writing and organizing your content?
I just use my phone now, and I don't remember what app it is.
Okay.
I just use my phone, and then I download it into my computer, and sometimes I'll do my own transcriptions. It helps me remember the interview and key points and all of that. There's a program that I've used a couple times that's transcribed, but I ended up doing so much work after that I typically just do my own.
Okay. Do you do book doctoring? And if so, how do the time frames and fees differ from ghostwriting? Like, are they miles apart, close? I
They're
mean,
pretty,
between that and editing,
it's in between editing
right?
and ghostwriting.
Okay.
Because you're basically
Um,
rewriting most of the book for someone when you do book doctoring.
right.
But
So,
they've written the first draft. So book doctoring compared to ghostwriting, you're not creating the original content.
right,
You're fixing it. Now, the difference between book doctoring and editing is the author feels like their content, their writing is almost to a publishable level and they just want you to clean it up. Book doctoring is someone saying, hey, this is my first draft. I need you to write it to a publishable level.
right.
Does that make
Do
sense?
you, I'm laughing. I'll explain eventually why I'm laughing. But anyway,
You're starting a business, aren't you?
I've done a few editing jobs and I've just finished what was supposed to be an editing job that was more like a book doctoring at least job. So, surprise. Um, do you prefer to receive the story for ghostwriting on paper written by the author, or via interview? And do you prefer virtual, Zoom or phone interviews, or in person? Pros and cons of each.
I mean, it's nice to have written material ahead of time for the information. I prefer meeting face to face. I just love working with someone face to face for that initial interview, all of that, because there's an energy there that you don't get in a Zoom call or a phone call. So my preference is in person. Now, a con to that is travel expenses. I've had to travel all over the country to do that. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it takes a big chunk of time. Um, the pros of that again is just the interaction. Um, but I prefer in person.
All right. I'm going to
Thank you.
interject, or Rachel might continue to interview Larry.
No, I'll leave Larry alone for now. Thank you, Larry.
I see we have
Sure.
another question. Since we're a little bit long, we're going to close the recording for now and then save any other questions for a little bit afterwards if Larry is able to stay a little longer. I know you mentioned you have a deadline coming up. We'll discuss that in the after party. So those that are here, please stay for the after party. In the meantime, Melissa, you want to share with us real quick what we have on tap for Writer's Chat next week?
Absolutely. We kind of made a little brief mention a while back about the importance of the first lines in the first chapters for getting a feel of things. And we were thinking about that from the perspective of a hook and pitching your book or your poem or whatever it is that you're writing to somebody, your article, and how important it is to get those first lines just right to draw the reader in. So next week, we are going to have all of you members who would like to participate send in your first 3 to 5 lines of your current work in progress to be critiqued for its hook potential. And we're, as the leaders of the Writer's Chat, we're going to kind of assess them live and give you some good feedback so that you can refine those first lines for your whatever project it is, so you can have it pitch ready. And so, yeah, please, I'll send up a reminder in the group as well. Send in your first 3 to 5 lines of your current work to us, and we can put emails in for those if you want to send them to one particular person. I guess we didn't discuss if you want to send them to me or Johnny or one of them, but we can work that out, and I'll put it up in the post, and we'll let you have that opportunity. We'd love to hear your first lines and get that critique going for you.
Sounds good. So I guess for now we'll close the recording. If you're catching the replay, thanks for watching our shows. If you were here today live, we are so appreciate you. We appreciate everybody. If you want to be here live, you can join us on Facebook at Writers Chat Members Group, and then you can be here, get all the event notifications, and catch the after party and get to ask your questions live. Great time. So for now, we'll say goodbye and we will see you next Tuesday.